Since Captain Ibrahim Traoré came into power, Western media hasn't stopped sounding the alarm. According to them, the security situation in Burkina Faso has gotten worse. They say it's all because Traoré kicked French troops out of the country. No foreign soldiers, no stability, that's the story they're selling. But why should we take their word for it? Why trust the same voices that have long pushed propaganda when it comes to African sovereignty? Something about that narrative feels off. Because when you look beyond the headlines, a very different picture starts to emerge. A recent evaluation by the Burkinabe military reveals something powerful. Over 71% of the territory that was once controlled by terrorists has now been recovered. That's not just a hopeful claim. It's based on real data from the ground. Some might find that hard to believe. After all, it doesn't fit the Western script, but there's evidence. And in this video, we're going to show it to you, step by step, fact by fact. Because maybe the real battle isn't just on the ground, maybe it's also for the truth. Recently, something important happened in Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. A high-level workshop was held, bringing together people from across the nation, government officials, civil society leaders, and representatives from major institutions. Their mission? To sit down, face the facts, and evaluate the true state of governance in Burkina Faso for the year 2024. When the workshop ended, they didn't just talk. They documented their findings and handed them directly to the Prime Minister. One of the most powerful conclusions in that report: the Burkinabe military has successfully reclaimed major parts of the country. The reconquest of territory once lost to jihadists was recognized as one of the year's biggest achievements. And here's the key detail. This wasn't a report written by outsiders or foreign consultants. It was reviewed, verified, and approved by people inside Burkina Faso. People who have lived through the fear, the violence, and the threat of terrorist attacks. People who know exactly what's at stake. So ask yourself, why would they fake this? According to the document, Burkina Faso increased the percentage of reclaimed land from 69% in 2023 to 71% in 2024. That might sound like just a number, but behind it lies years of struggle against armed groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS, groups that have terrorized the country since 2015. This progress means something. It marks the slow but steady return of state control and hope. And yet, if you check the internet right now, if you search for Burkina Faso security situation, you won't find this story. The Western media barely mentions it, and when they do, it's never framed as progress. Strange, isn't it? Why does the world ignore good news when it comes from a country that's standing on its own? According to the official report, Burkina Faso began to regain control of its lost territories in 2023, just a year after Captain Ibrahim Traoré took power. Since then, progress has been steady. More land, more communities freed from the grip of terror. But you wouldn't know that if you relied on Western media. Go online, search the headlines. You'll find a pattern. Every time there's an attack, every time Burkinabe soldiers or civilians lose their lives, the reports come flooding in. But when things improve, when villages are liberated, silence. It's almost as if they're rooting for failure. It's a narrative war, and it's being fought with headlines, omissions, and twisted stories. The goal? To paint Traoré's leadership as reckless, to make the military authorities look weak, to convince the world that Burkina Faso is falling apart. But here's the truth. Not everyone's buying it. Burkinabe citizens in the diaspora see right through the propaganda. They're not fooled by Western headlines. Why? Because they have something more powerful than newspapers. They have family back home, real voices, real updates, real progress. These citizens abroad aren't just watching, they're taking action. They believe in Traoré's vision, and they're backing it with more than words. They're sending money, funding operations, supporting the fight for sovereignty. You see, before the coup, Burkina Faso relied heavily on Western aid. Over half of its national budget came from outside, but when Traoré rose to power, that support vanished. The West pulled the plug, and yet, Traoré didn't flinch. He turned to his people, and they answered. The diaspora stepped up, not just to support a president, but to defend a dream of a Burkina Faso free from foreign control, free from dependency, a nation that writes its own story, with its own hands. Across oceans and continents, the call was heard. President Ibrahim Traoré had asked for unity, and the Burkinabe diaspora answered. From the streets of London to the deserts of Riyadh, from the heart of East Africa to the corners of Italy, Burkinabe communities stood up, not just in words, but in action. According to official reports, 8 major Burkinabe diaspora communities have rallied behind the effort to reclaim and protect their homeland. These aren't just symbolic gestures. This is real solidarity, measured in sacrifice and support. Together, they contributed over 31 million CFA francs to aid the fight for peace and stability in Burkina Faso. In January 2025, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Ouagadougou hosted an official handover ceremony. Presiding over the event was Foreign Minister Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré. The room was filled with pride, resolve, and undeniable proof that Burkinabe citizens abroad are deeply invested in the country's future. Among all the communities, one stood out. The Burkinabe diaspora in Saudi Arabia contributed more than 8.2 million CFA francs, alongside essential supplies for displaced citizens. Not far behind, the Garango community in Italy gave 7 million CFA francs, and a collective of Burkinabe from East Africa, including Burundi, Comoros, Kenya, Rwanda, and Tanzania, raised an impressive 7.7 million. And it didn't stop there. From Libya came 3 million. From Daloa in Côte d'Ivoire, 2 million. Qatar contributed 1.28 million, and the Manchester community in England added 1 million CFA francs. Even local associations like the Faso Zekula Pangha group in Italy joined the movement with another 1 million. This isn't just fundraising, it's a statement. During the ceremony, Foreign Minister Traoré made it clear, the diaspora isn't just a support network, it's a strategic force, a global extension of Burkina Faso's will. As he put it, the mobilization of Burkinabe abroad is one of the key pillars of President Ibrahim Traoré's foreign policy. Because this is no longer just about fighting back, it's about building something new, together. Here's the part that surprises even the skeptics. The donations from the Burkinabe diaspora, that massive 31 million CFA francs, that was just for December 2024. Since January 2025, they've already contributed 3 times that amount. Let that sink in. We're talking about millions being sent voluntarily from across the globe, by citizens who don't owe the government anything, yet are choosing to invest in their country's future. Now ask yourself, how many countries in the world can say the same? How often do you see ordinary citizens living abroad, contributing their own hard-earned money to help secure the land they left behind? The answer is simple. Only when they believe in something real. Would they be sending money if things were falling apart? If there was no progress? No hope? Of course not. And yet, the Western media continues to push the same tired narrative. Burkina Faso is failing. The military is losing control. Traoré has made things worse. But here's the truth. They don't live in Burkina Faso. They don't have family in Djibo or Dori or Kaya. They don't call home every weekend to ask if the roads are safe or if the schools are open again. They say they have sources, but sources can be crafted, bought, fabricated. History has taught us that media can be a weapon, and in the hands of the West, it's been used time and time again to distort, distract, and dominate. So, why should anyone choose the words of foreign journalists over the voices of Burkinabe people who are living the reality every single day? And if financial support isn't enough proof, then look at this. Schools that were once shut down because of terrorist threats are reopening. Classrooms that were empty for years now echo with the voices of children again. And this time, the confirmation didn't come from Burkinabe media. It came from the United Nations Children's Fund, an international body with no reason to lie. So, while the Western press clings to its narrative, the people of Burkina Faso are writing their own, and the world is starting to pay attention. Just last month, something remarkable happened in Burkina Faso. The executive director of UNICEF, Catherine Russell, visited the country along with several UNICEF representatives. This wasn't a ceremonial visit. It was purposeful, a direct effort to see the truth on the ground, far from the headlines and speculation. In Ouagadougou, they met with the Burkinabe Prime Minister, Rimtalba John Emmanuel Ouedraogo. Together, they discussed ways to strengthen cooperation between UNICEF and Burkina Faso, especially in the areas of child protection, access to education, and health services. And then, During their discussion came a powerful and undeniable moment. Catherine Russell looked at the Prime Minister and said, "We congratulate the government of Burkina Faso for the reopening of schools that had been closed due to insecurity." This was not a vague hope or a diplomatic compliment. It was a fact. She wasn't guessing. She and her team had visited these schools. They had walked through the classrooms. They had seen the children learning again. This was real. You see, many of these schools had been shut down for years because they were in areas that had fallen to terrorist control. Entire communities were silenced by fear, and children were left with no access to education. But now, those same schools have reopened. Children have returned. Lessons have resumed. The chalkboards are no longer blank. And let's be honest, no government would reopen schools in areas that weren't secure. That alone is proof that those territories have been retaken by the Burkinabe military. It's not just progress, it's a quiet, powerful victory. Speaking to the UNICEF director, the Prime Minister reflected on the challenges his country has faced. Despite the ongoing security crisis, he said, the government has continued to invest in its children. And more than that, he reaffirmed the government's full commitment to keep reopening schools and to expand investment in the future of Burkina Faso's youth. Because in the end, this isn't just about war or politics. It's about something deeper, a country rebuilding from within, and a generation of children being given a second chance. So yes, it's true. Schools in Burkina Faso have been reopening since January 2025, and not just in the cities. Even remote villages like Kalabo, Zelase, and Tandu have found their way back to the classroom, all thanks to the tireless efforts of the Burkinabe security forces. For years, these areas had been silenced by the fear of jihadist attacks. Education was one of the first casualties, but now the silence has been broken. It wasn't easy. The Burkinabe military special forces had to move in, stabilize the region, and ensure that it was safe for students and teachers to return. But they did it. And on February 17, 2025, something powerful happened. Teachers, under the protection of the Gumi 10 security units, returned to their posts. But here's where it gets even more remarkable. Not only did classes resume, reconstruction began. In some areas, the government didn't wait for normalcy to return. They pushed it forward. One such example is in the schools of Peni, in the Haute-Bassin region. There, President Ibrahim Traoré did something unexpected. In April 2024, months before the school year began, he made an unannounced visit to several schools in the municipality. No press, no ceremony, just a leader showing up. That visit wasn't just symbolic, it was action-driven. He spoke directly with teachers, he met with students, he listened, and soon after that visit, renovation work began. Old, crumbling school buildings began to receive the care they had long been denied. Paint, repairs, infrastructure, hope. Because for Traoré, this isn't just about reopening schools, it's about rebuilding dignity. And that, in the midst of crisis, is nothing short of extraordinary. The president was warmly received by the staff and students. After speaking directly with the young learners and encouraging the teachers, President Traoré made a heartfelt promise to renovate the school and provide essential teaching materials for the comfort and success of both students and teachers alike. Fast forward 1 year later, that promise has become a reality. Today, the school stands transformed thanks to the fulfillment of Traoré's commitment. The announcement was made by none other than the Chief of Staff to the President of Faso, Captain Martha Celeste Anderson. On his return from Beregadougou, where he launched construction works for a new municipal medical center, he made a stop at Peni municipality to inspect the schools in the region. What he saw was more than a renovated building. It was a symbol of progress, of hope, and of resilience. This isn't just about education. The reopening of schools is yet another clear sign that the Burkinabe security forces are winning the battle against terrorism and insecurity. It means territories that were once overrun by extremists are now back under national control. Children are returning to classrooms. Life is beginning to flow again. But despite these visible gains, the Western media tells a different story. Rather than highlight the victories, they double down on misinformation. Instead of showing rebuilt schools, they publish false reports accusing the Burkinabe military of killing civilians. Instead of showing classrooms full of students, they push fabricated claims of genocide. They go as far as spreading lies that President Traoré is targeting and killing children. It never ends. The headlines remain the same. over and over again. But the reality on the ground is this: schools are reopening, hospitals are being built, and Burkina Faso is reclaiming its future, step by step, promise by promise. The Western media's current narrative is clear and calculated. They claim that since the military leaders took power and Western forces were expelled, rebel attacks have increased. They insist that the leaders of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are struggling to maintain control, suggesting that the absence of foreign military presence has left these nations vulnerable. But we have to ask, why this constant drumbeat of negativity? The answer is simple. It's not about security. It's about influence. These stories are designed to undermine the military governments, to paint them as incompetent, reckless, and incapable of handling the crisis. The goal? To erode public trust, to breed unrest and disillusionment, and ultimately, to pressure the people into rejecting their own leaders. It's psychological warfare through headlines. That's why President Ibrahim Traoré made the bold decision to suspend Voice of America and other international media outlets that were deliberately spreading a distorted version of events in the Sahel. And that's also why, in a rare and powerful moment, the people of Burkina Faso stormed the U.S. Embassy, protesting a deeply misleading report by Human Rights Watch. That February report alleged that Burkinabe forces killed 223 civilians, including children, in 2 villages. But what does a report like that truly do? It doesn't protect human rights. It assassinates character. It creates doubt. It makes people question whether Captain Traoré, the man they admire and trust, is really who he says he is. That's the entire point. That's the strategy. Instead of showing the rebuilding of schools, the construction of health centers, or the reclaimed territories, the West focuses on fear and bloodshed. They want the world to see Traoré not as a liberator, but as a threat. But Burkinabe people are waking up. They see through the smear campaigns. They know this isn't about human rights. It's about control. And they're standing firm behind their leader, behind their sovereignty, and behind their future. Spreading the narrative that Burkina Faso's military is incompetent and in desperate need of foreign intervention is no accident. It's a calculated move. This kind of messaging is designed to stir unrest, not just within Burkina Faso, but across the Sahel. The goal is clear: create doubt, erode trust in the leadership, and eventually pressure the government to accept Western aid, and with that aid, foreign control. But this time, the people refuse to be manipulated. Hundreds of Burkinabe citizens took to the streets of Ouagadougou, gathering in front of the U.S. Embassy in a bold and unified protest. Their message was clear. They reject the lies, they reject the interference, and they stand behind their military. The protest came in response to a damning report by Human Rights Watch, which accused the Burkinabe armed forces of killing 223 civilians, including children, in late February. Following that report, the US and UK quickly issued a joint statement urging the Burkina Faso military to thoroughly investigate the alleged killings. Their statement read, "The US and UK governments are deeply concerned by reports of the massacre of civilians by the Burkina Faso military. But on the streets of Ouagadougou, the people were not convinced. Mobilized by the National Patriotic Citizens Watch Coordination Association, everyday citizens, shopkeepers, students, civil servants stood together in outrage. Footage from the protest showed demonstrators holding bold signs. One sign read, 'We, the sovereign people of Burkina Faso, call on you to leave our territory and focus on Gaza and Ukraine.' Protest spokesman Soumaila Nana did not hold back. He said it was astonishing that Western powers like the US and UK would so easily fall for what he called false accusations of civilian massacres, without proper evidence and without hearing from the people on the ground. The real question isn't why Burkinabe citizens are angry. The real question is, why are Western governments so eager to believe the worst, while ignoring the gains, the progress, and the truth? Another speaker at the protest, Mahamadou Ouedraogo, delivered a powerful message. "We came to convey a message to the American people. Stop spreading accusations against our military, men and women who are risking their lives to defend this nation. Where are these so-called human rights defenders when terrorists are massacring our people? What are they doing?" That's a very good question. Where were these voices when Burkina Faso was bleeding under the watch of US and French troops? Where was the international outrage as terrorism spread like wildfire while Western forces were still stationed in the region? These same analysts and media outlets never analyzed how the death toll skyrocketed during Western presence. But now that they've been expelled, now they suddenly care about insecurity? Now they call their reports courageous? Let's be honest, this is not journalism, it's propaganda. A strategic effort to discredit the military leadership that dared to say no more to foreign control. That's why President Traoré's decision to suspend Western media platforms in Burkina Faso was not just justified, it was necessary. And to be clear, if you call yourself a true Pan-African, you cannot blindly believe everything you hear from Western media.